I am Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susi.
And we're paranormal specialists who live in the most haunted city on earth, Savannah, Georgia. Every day is Halloween in our line of work, so join us as we spin true tales of haunts, murders, and disturbing Savannah history. I'm Madison.
I'm Chris.
And welcome to the most haunted city on earth. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of The Most Haunted City on Earth. My name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susi.
And today we have a very special guest with us, Mr. Ben Murray. He is a tour guide here in Savannah and also a Savannah native. Have you lived in Savannah your whole life?
No, I'm not.
Oh, well, there you go. Long enough, at least.
Not long enough. Yeah. I've been 20 years.
There you go. That'll count in my opinion. But Mr. Ben, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Ben Murray, a.k.a. Dr. Doodoo from Hearse Tours in Savannah, Georgia. We started back in 2002, and we go around in a converted hearse where we introduce you to the spirits of Savannah.
Awesome. That's so much fun. It really is. It's just like a very unique experience for people to have because, like, when else are you going to say, like, oh, I went around Savannah in a hearse, but I'm not dead? You know, it's
most people want to reserve that for one time experience.
Absolutely. But so, what made you get into tour guide work?
Well, I started earlier with Segway tours sometime back, but it wasn't from a ghost perspective. And I had a transition spirit over me. And I was very distraught at that time. And it led me to Congress in Lincoln, where I was introduced to a statue of an Indian that's been carved into the cornerstone of a building that was, I understand, to be spiritually guided towards the paranormal situation. And because of when I got there, I was so distraught. And when I left, I was so peaceful. So now every day that I'm downtown, I go by Congress in Lincoln to meet Chief Indian Rain.
That's awesome. So you told us a little bit about kind of like your first experience with him and how you were kind of blessed by him. Would you like to go a little bit further?
Well, yeah.
Into that?
On one day, I mean, I had several different companies, and one was a taxi cab company, and I usually make a quota as to what I wanted to make. And this particular night, I hadn't come to my quota, but I was on my way back home, and I got a fare at the Hyatt that was going to the mansion. When I got down Whitaker Street, they were talking among themselves about the spirits, the couple that was in the car. And they came to me and said, Mr. Taxi driver, what do you think? So that gave me the opportunity to get in their conversation, and I did. And I told them about Chief Indian Rain because that's where that led me into the spiritual realm. And I carried them there, and they were so fascinated by my story. And the young lady went up and touched the statue, rubbed a hand on it. And afterwards, when I got them back to the mansion, they gave me a tip, which was $70, which was the exact amount that I needed to meet my quota.
Oh, wow.
So I was hooked ever since then.
Yeah, absolutely.
So here I am.
Absolutely. You're like, I like this ghost. That's so fascinating. You know, it's always nice to hear people's reasoning why they got into the paranormal, because everybody has their story of like, this is my first story. I know you briefly talked about your mother also coming to visit you.
Yes.
So would you like to tell that story?
Yeah, my mom came to me. I have her cane here that I usually carry with me in my car most of the time. And this cane belonged to my mom, and she came to me through a cardinal, if you will. It came to my window, and this cardinal came in to my window and was sitting there, and just sitting there looking at me. And I came outside of my house, back to the window, and the cardinal was still there. When I went to approach it, it flew away. Well, I had no idea that the cardinal was signified as an angel coming towards you. Last Sunday, a witch approached me out of Colonial Park Cemetery. I was in there droning. A witch came up to me from Florida, and she and I connected right away. She wanted to visit the cemeteries in Savannah. Well, of course, the cemeteries in Savannah closes at 8 o'clock, and they locked the gate, so we couldn't go. So we went to a cemetery outside of the Savannah on Dean Forest Road. And there, the spirit came to me of my mom, and she just said that it is safe in a cloud, and just went away. Aww. So I'm hooked.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, it's interesting that you say that she showed up to you as a cardinal, because that's how my grandmother shows up to me, actually. She's very active. I don't know how active your mom is as a cardinal. My grandmother, and she does this to everybody in my life, including JT. So oftentimes, like in the windows out here at the theater, you'll see her pecking at the window to get our attention. And when we boarded up these windows, we had to put film over them to make the blackout. She learned how to use the Ring camera. No. And I swear, we just the other day, we get a Ring camera notification, and she's just staring at the camera. And she sits there for like a solid 2 minutes. It's so funny how they do that, you know, where they will just wait for you for them to get your attention. So does she visit you often?
Yes, and it's ironic that you're saying that. Mm-hmm. Mom follows me to work.
That's so
I can hear the chirping. I've been able to identify the sound of the cardinal. I'm not always seeing her or seeing the cardinal, but I hear it. And once I get to the lot of where the hearses is, I can hear her in the trees in the back just chirping. And then every now and then she'll fly past.
She might be your spirit guide now. So
that's true.
I welcome it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of times your spirit guides are loved ones that have passed over, because that's why my grandmother follows me around so much, is because she became my spirit guide when she passed away. So it's very possible she's, just watching over you all the time, and especially with your line of work where you're driving all the time, you need somebody to be watching over you. So yeah, that's a lovely story. I love that. That's very sweet.
Good. And I'm now that you and I have connected to the Cardinals,
yes,
then be friends for life.
Absolutely. It's the Cardinal fam, y'all.
It's the Cardinal fam.
Yes. So we always like to ask our guests who are tour guides, what's your favorite Savannah ghost story?
I have several, of course. The Pirate House is one of them that I love. I think but I also like the. I think more so the Sorrelweed House, more so than anything else. And then of course there's the Wright Square. I don't want to identify with a favorite here at this particular moment, because I'm sort of feeling my way around with what is the best, because I want to get an accurate story.
Sure.
I also want to understand what happened there. And I also would like to be able to experience some of the spirits from that particular one. That's why I'm trying to get into the Pirate House. I want to drone the basement and see if I feel the spirit coming on. So with all of the spirits here in Savannah, I think the spirits come because we have kept, or Savannans have kept, part of the original structure of what has gone by, and haven't put cement all over, and the dirt is still here, because I think that's where it comes from.
Absolutely.
And then if the spirit from your surroundings are cultivated, then it's going to generate into people like us.
Absolutely. We talk about that a lot, actually, how Savannah honors their spirits a lot. I've said it multiple times. In Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, they have that quote where, to understand Savannah, you have to understand our spirits, or understand our ghosts. And so I think you're right, because we have kept it so well intact, why wouldn't a spirit want to leave?
Exactly.
It's the same way with people move here and then they don't go away. It's something about it. It's magnetic to souls.
It's what happened to me.
Yep.
I got here, and I really didn't know anything about Savannah before I got here. And when I got here, I didn't leave for 5 years. I wouldn't go to a funeral. I wouldn't go to a wedding. I wouldn't go to nothing. My daughters are mad at me now because I wouldn't do it.
That's the same thing that happened to me as well. Chris is basically a native from outside of
They
Savannah.
won't claim that. I've been here for 30 years. And yeah, it's very much the same thing. I thought I was going to be here for a year, maybe 2.
Yeah.
30 years later, I'm like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
I'm still here.
How did it happen?
Did you have? Was the Chief Indian Rain your first encounter with spirits, or do you have stories from your youth? Did you? It was like literally the door opened right then.
My first experience.
That's fascinating.
I think I have transitioned over because I had a heart attack at my house, and I fell off the swing into on the deck, and it was raining, and there was a voice, an Indian voice said, "Roll over into the rain. The rain will save you. Roll over into the rain." It said it 7 times. Roll over into the rain. And I remember all of that. And I did roll over into the rain, and I pulled myself up by the swing, went into my back door, and there stands my sister, who never comes to my house without calling, because I don't let people in if I don't know you're coming. So I said, "Why are you here?" She said, "I was just in the neighborhood and I decided to stop by." I said, "Take me to the doctor." I went to the hospital. They gave me a heart monitor, and shortly after that is when I was depressed. That's how I got downtown and met the Chief Indian Rain. I named him Chief Indian Rain. I don't know what.
Right.
There's no name to it. I gave him Chief Indian Rain because it was Indian voice that told me to roll over into the rain. And then I met this Indian statue in Congress at Lincoln.
Wow. That's such an intense story. It honestly shows because we have a lot of viewers who ask, I used to be sensitive as a child and I'm no longer sensitive. It shows that at any age you can become sensitive. And it really shows too that a lot of people are blocked off to it for so long. And so, sometimes it does take just a traumatic incident to really open yourself up to those sort of things. But is there any kind of Native American attachment to your home or anything like that, or?
Not that I know of.
Sure.
I'm doing the investigation now, if you will, to sort of find out. I want to go back and see, and I think a lot about things that could have been a spirit kind of interacting, but I just didn't recognize it. I just didn't acknowledge it because from my culture, a Baptist surroundings, we want the Holy Ghost. We don't want any other kind of ghost that is around. So that could have been a deterrent for me for not doing. But
absolutely,
I'm rebellious, and I did anyway.
Well, and I think that's a misunderstanding that a lot of people have. It's because there's plenty of people who grow up in church and they're told their entire life exactly what you just said. You don't want those types of spirits because those are all demons. But it's not necessarily the case. Sometimes they are just people that are still around and they haven't crossed over yet, or for whatever reason that might be. And that doesn't mean they're innately evil, but sometimes they are, but most of the time your house spirits or things in Savannah, I've noticed most of them are good spirits. They're helpful and things of that nature, and sometimes a little annoying, but that's okay. So
well, I've gotten to the point where I painted my house blue, so I've got I got the Haint blue. I got the Haint blue in it, so
absolutely. Yeah, the Haint blue is a great thing. If you guys who are listening don't know what Haint blue is, Haint blue is traditionally used to ward off evil spirits. So if you go around Savannah, or honestly most places in the South, especially with a rich Gullah culture, you'll see on the top of porches they're painted blue, this light blue color, or on their shutters or things like that. Just don't paint it on the inside of your house because then it just keeps it in. So yeah. But so when JT and I met you, you actually told us about the weeping times, which I was really interested in because I didn't know a ton about it. Would you like to tell our viewers a little bit about that?
Sure. The weeping time is an incident that happened where 429 slaves were sold here in Savannah. They came from McIntosh County from a slave owner, Pierce Butler. And Pierce Butler, one of the unique things about Pierce Butler was that he treated his slaves well, if that is something that you can do, but he did, and they loved him. And before the sale took place, of course, he had a gambling debt that he had to pay, $500,000, I think it was. And he explained to the slaves what he was doing, and they accepted that. And he told them that he was going to buy them back once he got his finances in order. And they believed that. So he brought them all here to Savannah. It started raining. It rained for 3 days. And he promised them that he would keep the families together. There was a lovers there that hadn't married. So there was a minister, a Methodist minister. I don't know why they distinguished that, but there was a Methodist minister who told them if you got married, they would sell you together. He married them there. That has become the sacred entity of the weeping time. Historically, they are stating that because no one died, that it's not historic. The grounds that they are trying to use is the 10-mile racetrack out of skirts of Savannah. And from that area, they want to put in some other industry there that they don't want, the neighborhood, some other folks, because of what happened on that day. So we are trying to utilize the fact that the marriage was the sacred. What is more sacred than a marriage and a union and bringing up a family? So from that perspective, the weeping time is in existence here in the family. And I might make mention that the reason why it's so significant to me, that brought me so close to it, that because of the rain. As soon as the last sale was sold, it stopped raining.
Wow.
Well, it's strange that we refuse to recognize the significance, because it was the largest single sale of slaves in the history of this area, like in one event. And that should stand as a historic marker. You know, that should, because Savannah is notorious for trying to gloss over its slave history.
Absolutely.
You know, notorious for trying to servants' quarters and, you know, and sell a gentler tale. But when you have an event like that and you refuse to acknowledge it, you know, you refuse to indicate that this was significant. Because it was significant. It was the sale of human lives, and it was a time when it could be viewed and witnessed at such a scale.
Yes.
I mean, that is humongous. That's,
yes.
you know, that's an entire school's worth of human beings.
Yes.
You know, being sold off
Yeah.
in a single event, in a single go. And that does create that sorrow, that darkness, the idea that we were this complicit as a society in what can only be described as an evil act. You know, even with the parameters set of, you know, a relatively gentle slave owner and slaves that were treated well, but they were still slaves. They're still property.
Yes.
Yeah. So much so that they could be parceled off, that
yes.
they could be sold off.
Yes.
You know, there's something in your heart that says we shouldn't ignore
yes.
this. You know, this deserves recognition, and it deserves, you know, passionate retellings and people who will tell the story.
Yes.
You know, people who will get up and say, this is what happened, you know, on this date, at this time. And the 3 days of rain is enough to really cement the idea that even the angels were weeping. You know?
Absolutely.
Yes.
So I think, yeah, it's odd that the argument had to come down to that marriage, that sacred act,
yes.
versus this kind of cataclysmic event.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
The uprooting of all these people through no fault of their own, through no occasion of their own, and because they were seen as property.
Yes.
You know, that just, you know, it's baffling, really.
I think it was easy for Savannah to kind of write it off, was because it's in the outskirts. You know,
Right.
it's
Yes.
over off of what
Augusta Road.
Yeah, which is if you're not from Savannah, it's a good bit outside of the downtown historic district. So you know, because tourists aren't really going to be wandering off into that area, they're like, yeah, we can just kind of pretend.
And
like
a lot of
that.
Savannah was the very fancy houses where people went to city, you know, to be in the city. But we were flanked on all sides by these plantations, by these larger farms, by the actual industry of Savannah.
Savannah,
You know,
yes.
Savannah's, the city, was where you had wealth and affluence and shiny buildings and, beautiful squares. But it was absolutely supported by, you know, the agricultural slave-owned, industry that was all around Savannah. Yeah.
But there's multiple places like that, even in the historic district, where Savannah kind of pretends like it's. It didn't really happen. Like the Candler Oak. Are you familiar with the Candler Oak?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's that's a big one for people to gloss over because it's this very ancient tree.
Right.
But they don't talk about the dark side of it, where they would hang people, African American people, for crossing through the park. It's like in my opinion, that should be like on the historic marker and not just that it's a 500-year-old tree.
Yes.
But you know, it's very unfortunate. But I think there's some tour guides, especially in Savannah, that are doing a really good job of bringing back those stories. I know Pat Gunn is
Yes.
doing a great job with that.
Yes.
And you're obviously, you know, bringing it back as well, you know, being with the Hearse Tours and whatnot, you're able to tell the stories that people aren't getting told usually. So
It's ironic that you said something about the Candler Oak tree, because I lost a drone in that tree just recently.
really,
You and I are too connected.
I know.
I just lost a drone, and I bought another drone to go see if I can find that drone. But as I get to the height, I get scared. Anyway, yes.
That's so interesting. Yeah, the tree was like, no.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But now the tree took my took my drone. So I got to find out what kind of spirits up in there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We got to do it.
Electronics and spirits, they are not a good combination.
They're not a good
you know?
combination.
Yeah.
You put an electronic device too close to a very hot spiritual place, it's going to drain all that battery, it's going to drain all that energy, and you're going to lose whatever it is. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've been on ghost hunts where our fully charged cameras, our fully charged phones just die because there's something just draining away the electricity from them.
Well, maybe I shouldn't take my second drone. And
I
try to
wouldn't.
find- Okay.
I strongly advise against it.
It is such a pleasure to meet you, because I don't want to lose $500 a day.
Absolutely.
No. Always make sure you have a clear line of sight to your drone, because some people will fly them around the corner and
Oh, yeah.
there's no
Yeah.
telling what's behind the,
Yeah,
the outside of the corner.
It's funny when you say that things get drained with spirits, because even memory cards on cameras get corrupted by spirits. We had one happen at the Sorrel Wheat House recently. We were filming an interview down there with Calvin, who is the manager over there and all that. And so we were filming, and JT was freaking out because we had just filmed like probably an hour and a half worth of content. And he's like, something's wrong with the memory card. But he didn't want to like let everybody know, you
Right.
know, that something was wrong. But immediately, like when he gets back, he's like, JT buys memory cards that are very expensive so that they do not. It was a $600 memory card so that it does not corrupt. But it was basically like the spirits were telling us, like, okay, it's time to go now. It's really late. We're
Yeah.
ready for you to be done. So,
Wow.
yeah. Yeah, JT was able to fix it. So you guys on Patreon, you'll be able to see that content. But yeah, JT was able to save it, thankfully. But
Well, JT and I are going to have to get together, because that happened to me in Colonial Park 2 nights ago. I did this full view, and I got back to the house, nothing was there. Everything else outside of Colonial Park, I got. And I just remembered my drone landed by itself. It just landed behind the fence. It was 11 o'clock at night. I panicked. Then I thought, well, all you got to do is lift it off again. And that's what I did. I tried, and I lifted it, and it came up. And I brought it out the fence. It's ironic that you said that.
wow.
There you go.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy the things, especially with like how much technology has changed too. It's so many people have experiences with the paranormal where they're like, this weird thing happened with my camera at this haunted location, and it's like, well, it's probably because there was a ghost, but
Yes.
it's But if you do get a chance to get into the Sorrel Weed House, I could see a very high possibility of you having an experience, because I was in there for maybe 5 minutes and something happened.
Okay.
So, and then lots of other spirits are very active in that house. So I highly recommend if you can get in there.
Yes, well, we're going. Well, my situation was with the Pirate House, but but I will. But I'm in the process of trying to introduce myself to all of the industry of the spirits, ghosts and the spirits, to see if there can be a good collaboration where we can get the stories pretty much the same.
Absolutely.
To a point, even to the point of training tour guides or from the ghost perspective, so they can have their stories, so we don't necessarily just make up our own idea of what happened, even though we have to go with our own experiences, because nobody had the experience that I had with Chief Indian Rain. And so they can't tell that story. But the true stories the stories that are happening around, be whether they're true or not, should be consistent, I think. So if we as tour guys do that, the ghost ones, then we can.
Well, I mean, there are these two branches of the same tree. There's the history side, which is the facts that we can definitely nail down.
Right.
And the history should never change, because the history is, in fact, able to be traced. You can actually see these things. The only problem is, in everyday life, in everyday occurrence, those things aren't marked down in history.
Right.
There are so many things that are just lost because time does not hold things in place. And that's where we get the other branch, which is experiential, which is just the speculations that turn into ghost stories. And I'm very much into listening to what people always told. What was the story that they always told? Like, the Pirate's House is a fascinating place, because for years and years, even when I first moved here, and we used to be able to go down into the cellar pretty regularly, and then they I want to say there might have been a cave-in or an issue with the security of the actual tunnel, that because it only went back a little ways,
right?
But people would go back in there, and they were like, we can't let people back. We'll put a little scansion up, and then it was like, no, let's not let people down here anymore. But I remember, because the whole thing was that they kept telling us that Captain Flint was the ghost of the Pirate's House. It's Captain Flint. Captain Flint died in the Pirate's House. The only problem was Captain Flint is fictional. Yeah, he's a made-up person.
Yeah.
And that was so fascinating to me, because that means for the better part of a century, people were very happy to say it was Captain Flint.
Yes.
And to the point at which people would say that they hear Captain Flint, because we know that Captain Flint's last words, according to Treasure Island, was, "Bring aft the rum, bring the rum."
Yeah, bring it.
And so people can, they'd say, I heard someone calling for rum.
Yes.
I heard something. And it's like, well, in a pirate establishment, that might not be weird.
Right.
Yeah. There's ghosts, bring the rum. But it was like all of this enforcement on this notion that the ghost was, a fictional person. And I was like, but what a good story.
Absolutely.
What a great story, because it was... Bring aft the rum, young Darby. So Darby, another fictional character who was the cabin boy that helped Captain Flint there at the end, was also oftentimes. And I was like, and there were people who didn't even know Treasure Island at all.
At all, yeah.
But they were having, this concept of Darby and Captain Flint and this sensations. And I'm like, that's amazing. That we've reinforced whatever spirits are in this building to work in this pattern, to fulfill our expectations. And in that fulfilling of expectation, the spirits are being nourished by our interest, by us saying, here's the ghost story.
Ghost.
And the ghosts are like, I'm here.
Yeah, they're
Captain
like,
Flint, yo ho. It's like, and more than likely, it was a gardener. More than likely, it was somebody at the trustee's garden, who lived a fruitful life and died, and they're like, I'm just a gardener.
Yeah.
You want a pirate?
But I think it's funny that people said that they would see or hear Darby also, because I'm like, that establishment was not kid friendly at all. It's so funny how, it's perceived now, it's a family friendly restaurant. It's great. People love going there. But in history, it was a rough place.
Yeah.
It's like, that is a hardened area, so you would not be bringing your kids into the Pirate's house.
Darby, being a cabin boy, was probably a young adult, I would imagine. I mean, he could have started off as a 14, 15-year-old, but he would have been just the lackey of the ship.
Sure.
At that point.
Yeah.
Because that's another thing. Pirates are fascinating, and it's hard to actually get a bead on the pirates of Savannah.
Yeah.
Mostly because of the way we're inland. Because Savannah is not on the coast. That is something that should be stated. We're not on the coast.
On the coast, yes.
Yeah.
We are in the river, which is an ideal place for pirates, because it gets them out of the line of sight of patrol ships that used to go up and down the coast. As a matter of fact, Savannah was a perfect hidden cove. Blackbeard Island sits right in the mouth of the Savannah River. So, but history is shaky, especially with criminals, especially with people who are hiding.
Yes.
They didn't show up and say, okay, write this down.
Right.
Yeah.
I was here, I was doing this, and this is what happened. So we get a lot from like Charleston. Charleston is where they hanged them all. So Charleston's full of stories, and Port Royal is where they, used to party. But Savannah's where they hid.
Where they hid.
That's a tricky thing, and something that I think I would love to do that deep dive of the pirates of Savannah. What was that? Because a lot of people and a lot of historians are now of the mindset that there were no pirates in Savannah. Baja, that's crazy. And it's like, hang on, because most people will argue that the golden age of piracy was over long before Savannah was founded in 1733. Yeah. But that's not entirely true either. It's like we had pirates and privateers all the way up into the early 1900s. There was plenty of pirates to be had all throughout Savannah's history. But the trick is, were we keeping secrets? Which Savannah is notorious for. We're good at keeping secrets. Were we keeping secrets, and who knows those secrets?
Right.
Wasn't there like something you had mentioned about over on Hutchinson Island with like
it's Oakland Island.
Oh, was it?
Oakland.
Yeah. Oakland. So Oakland Island, it's interesting because Robert Louis Stevenson, who wrote Treasure Island, definitely took the lore. He was listening to stories. He was listening to people tell stories of pirates. And Savannah came up. The Pirate's House, this inn in Savannah. So he actually set Captain Flint's death there. And the treasure map being passed off happened in Savannah. That's how the story goes, because he had heard it. And what else he had heard was that, and this was interesting, the Treasure Island of Treasure Island was told to Robert Louis Stevenson as Salt's Island. Salt's Island was Treasure Island. It's where the treasure was buried. Turns out Oakland Island was originally owned by a man named Salt, and was originally called Salt's Island. And what makes that interesting is, which would you do? Would you put your treasure on an island that can be seen and happened upon by anyone marauding the ocean, or would you go inland into these small tidal creeks and into this little area? Oakland Island is actually nestled inside the marshes. And wouldn't that be a much more ideal place to hide something accessible, defensible, and it's like
undiscoverable.
Exactly.
Right? Because that was a lot of people always talk about why is Savannah called Savannah. Yeah. It's a swamp. Why is it called Savannah? And my theory, and I think the prevailing theory, is when you're coming up to Savannah by boat, and you look out, what you see is tall grass. And it must look like a savanna. It must look like this plain of tall grass. But that tall grass is sticking out of the marsh. If you got off your boat onto that tall grass, you would sink almost immediately. That's not land. So, it's one of those things where Oakland Island was nestled in marsh.
In marsh.
So, when you try to get to it, you're not hitting land. You
Right.
keep like dropping
Yep.
into like, waist deep or deeper muck, really. And so it's fascinating that when I read that the original Treasure Island was supposedly an island called Salt's Island, it just like stuck in the back of my head.
Yeah.
And then years and years later, I learned that Oatland Island was at one point was a rice plantation that was owned by a man named Salt, and it was called Salt's Island. And I was like, interesting.
And that is, and now that you said that, a couple of years ago, we went out fishing out and came 10 miles out into the Atlantic Ocean. And in coming back, and I got it on film. I filmed fishing, and you're exactly right. It looks like grass just coming up until you get up.
Yeah, right when you're up on it, you're
on
like,
it,
that's
right.
not grass at all.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
And because it's one of those things. It's like we know what a savanna is, and savanna actually doesn't have that, because on top of the fact that we don't have these big plains of high grass, we were kind of wooded as well. It was kind of a woody, swampy area. So it didn't register as a savanna. Not really.
Yeah, it's funny because there are places that you can drive like a little bit outside of Savannah when you're going down like 95. You'll look out and you're like, this looks like Africa. Like with the trees, like Jay, where's that part of 95 where right outside of Brunswick, there's
the Gold
these
Isles.
Yeah,
Sure.
there's these trees that look so different than what you would expect from Georgia. And I think that's why, there's places like that.
Oh, sure.
that's-
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very.
it's-
It must have looked a lot like the African,
Yeah.
coastline and the African.
have you been to
safari
Harris?
and things.
Have you been to Harris Neck?
Harris Neck?
Yeah.
No.
It looks just like that. Just as, what you're describing now.
Yeah.
You drive back off the road off 17, back to Harris Neck. Exactly.
Really?
And that's what happened. And that's a whole other story about down there in Harris Neck. They took land from down there in Harris Neck, and there's so many spirits down there.
Oh, sure.
Because I went down there and on a fishing trip, and it is.
So you're an avid fisher, is what you're saying.
No, I'm just a man with a pole.
JT can relate to that. I wish JT was sitting here with us because he is also the same way. He's like, just drop the pole into the water.
I feed the fish a lot. You know, yeah. So,
Absolutely.
Well, JT and I got to go out fishing one day. We'll
Absolutely. There's so many spirits that are around Savannah that are not in the historic district that people
sure.
don't realize, and it's because we don't talk about them.
Right.
It's easy for spirits to get forgotten.
Yes.
There's plenty of displaced peoples.
Yeah.
Lots of skirmishes that no one talks about, because Savannah was indeed a border, a military border. We were cushioning South Carolina from the Spaniards to the south.
Right.
We were actually, and so there were plenty of skirmishes, not just with the indigenous people, but with the Spaniards. And so it was a military operation. When you go to Chippewa Square, you look at the statue of Oglethorpe. He's wearing armor. He's got a sword.
Yeah.
He is not an administrator.
Right.
He's obviously General
Yeah.
Oglethorpe.
Yeah.
And people kind of forget the tumultuous relationship of colonizers, and Spain was fully vetted in Florida, and so there was constant conflict.
Yeah.
And constant abductions, and the indigenous people were abducting people. We were displacing the indigenous people. The Spaniards were coming in. There were all kinds of curious battles. Not full blown wars, but definitely conflicts where people were coming and going, and in the outcome, bodies. There were dead people.
Yeah.
Even in the downtown area, there's areas where people forget that people were buried or things like that happen in front of the Massey School. What square is that? That's
Calhoun?
Calhoun Square. That was the original African-American burial ground. And then you've got in Chippewa Square. You got a Native American burial mound, which is like.
But also down right on the bluff was a burial mound.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Warren Square was a burial mound, and intriguingly, the reason why the land was probably given up to begin with, because a lot of people are like, oh, the indigenous people were like, here, take this land. The truth of the matter is, the river is saltwater primarily. Saltwater does not make for good settlement. You want fresh water.
Fresh water, yeah.
So a lot of the indigenous people were actually in those creeks, and just outside of Savannah, there are a lot of fresher water. Yeah, fresher water.
Brackish, if you will.
Brackish,
yes.
Yeah.
It comes together.
But, being on the Savannah River was great for transportation, but it wasn't necessarily good for agriculture. And that was something that the early settlers learned, was that the agriculture of Savannah is narrow. Even though there's a lot of overgrowth, it was hard to cultivate your crops because the ground was full of, mineral deposits and salt and all of these things. Clay.
Yeah.
They thought they were going to make mulberry farms and have silk.
Right.
They thought, well, we'll cultivate silkworms. No, that did not happen. Which of course led to the cotton crop. And it's fascinating when you look at how things had to play out in order for it to end up the way it
work.
For the way that it came about, because had the silkworms worked, the silk industry, it would have been a good 50 years earlier. We would have had that agricultural boom to Savannah. Otherwise, Savannah kind of languished for a while there in its attempts to create a crop that they could, have good commerce with.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're a gardener in Savannah, you'll know it is incredibly difficult to grow anything here because of the heat. And then on top of it,
but things you don't want to grow like wildfire.
So true. It is so true. Collard greens grow so well in Savannah. My collard greens for like the entire spring to summer just boomed.
Yep.
So also mulberry trees do grow actually very well.
The silkworms don't like the climate.
Yes. The our next door neighbor, Miss Rivers, she's been living in her house for 60 years, and she has this massive, very creepy mulberry tree in the backyard, and all it does is drop mulberries. It's mulberry season because your entire pavement will just be stained
with
purple. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's but yes, if you ever want to garden in Savannah, get a raised garden bed, because
I was gonna say, you have to put down the soil, because if you use just the soil at hand, there are things that grow. We learned, over time, we learned which crops do best in this soil. But Savannah itself is a very tricky agricultural puzzle, and which of course drives how we ended up depending on slaves, and because originally Savannah said no slaves. Originally Savannah was very idealistic in how it was going to approach. We have a jet fly directly over us.
Yes, we're right by, fairly close to Hunter Army Airfield. So
Hunter Army Airfield and Gulfstream.
Well. Yeah. So pardon our neighbors, I guess.
It's not our grumbling stomachs.
Yes, but so. As you start to journey into your paranormal experience, what are you planning to do? Paranormal investigation, or are you just looking for ghost stories? Or
I'm not actually sure what it is that I really want to do. I'm being led by the Spirit.
Sure.
And whatever directs my path, because I had no idea I was going to be here this morning. It wasn't planned. I don't try to plan too much in advance, because you never know what happened. So I want to find a spirit based through paranormal. I want to get a group together where we go and we really experience it, either the energy or a voice. And I think that that's the only way that I will be satisfied, but I am totally convinced through the spirits because of my experience. In the Hearse business, we are not one where we go out and try to bring people in because of the hearse. People are fearful of riding in hearse. Sure. I want no parts of it. and as Chris said, that want to be their last one. And I have one. I have a hearse that's called the last ride. It won't let me cut it because we have to cut the top off there. Right. It used to belong to a private owner. That hearse wasn't a funeral home hearse. Maybe at one time, but we got it from a private owner. Sure. Whose wife died, who loved the car. She's in that car.
Interesting.
That's why I drive it every day. Now that I got it and I got it up, I just drive it everywhere.
So what's the, well, first, just for our viewers, if you could explain kind of what cutting the hearse is so that they kind of know, because I'm sure they're probably like, what does that mean?
What do you mean? Oh, yeah. I'm sorry.
No, it's totally fine. And then also, if you could explain kind of a few of the things that have gone wrong with the hearse every time you try to cut it.
Oh, well, this particular one, it didn't happen before. When we cut the hearse, we have to cut the top off, out, where we put a roof, extended roof over top, where we can put in 8 seats inside of the hearse. We clean it out. And we put these 8 seats in and open up the back door. So you come in from the back door where the casket used to slide in. So you got an extended roof over top of a hearse that we drive around the city in. Now, the original owners of the hearse specifically wanted the older hearses, and they used them because of the nostalgia of it. Of course, I'm old, and I don't want old hearse. I wanted new hearse. Yeah. So when I came into the component, we started getting some newer hearses. But most of the older hearses, there's 2 of them that we have that really won't start unless the driver that is attached to it is there.
Oh.
So Russ, our owner, he picked up this, I'm sure, and so he assigned the cars to whomever that it is. But just last evening, I could go out, none of the hearse would start, and we called a mechanic in, and we got him going, and I did my little thing that I have no idea what I did, and the hearse just started up, and we had a ball.
So with the last ride, what exactly goes on when you try to cut it? Is it parts fly out, or is it it won't even let you cut into it, or what is it?
Not yet. Other things has been happening.
Gotcha.
For instance, we were scheduled to cut it. I bought a generator because where we are, there's no electrical stuff. So I bought in all stuff to cut this hearse on the lot. That night before, someone came and stole all the generators and everything. So we couldn't cut it.
Right, oh my gosh.
And I've been procrastinating on it, and I will not let it happen yet. Every time Russ said, let's schedule to do it, I make up something to come and do it. And that's what tells me, because I know from the night before that Russ is going to come in, so I'm prepared for it. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened. That's the way that the last ride is going to be extended. So I'm trying to establish something on it, the history of it. I'm going back to the husband. I'm going back to the husband who sold it because of his wife, to find out as much as I can, because of Chris' involvement with me, telling me that we got to do the investigation. We got to go find out where the story it begins. So that's what I'm going to go. I'm going back to the original story to find out what I need to go for the last ride.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's kind of like you're Christine.
Well, it was funny because when I pulled up, I saw it and I was like, oh, weird. It doesn't have, the second layer on it. It doesn't have, because, it's a common sight in Savannah, seeing these tours roll by, and it's a hearse, but it also, it's got 8 people that you can see from the shoulder up, sticking out of the top of it.
Yes, and they've got their bachelorette sashes
exactly.
on it. Woohoo! In a hearse. But JT gave me the signal, so we got to start wrapping things up. But thank you so much for joining us. This has been wonderful. So delightful, and we're happy to have you back anytime you would like to be on. So, but is there anything that you would like to plug for our viewers?
Well, we at Hearse Tours, this being October, we would like to put together a good paranormal searching or a party for Savannah to let them know that we are here. And the spirits of Savannah should be intact. And I'm so glad that I met Chris, because from his knowledge that we have, if we gather this information here, we'll be able to live happy lives and understand what is really going on.
Absolutely.
You know.
Absolutely.
So from that, and I really thank you guys for even allowing us to come, and I really appreciate
course.
it. Thank you.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. And if you guys are ever in Savannah, definitely check them out. It's a great tour. It's lots of fun, very unique, obviously. If you ever have wanted to be in a hearse for some reason, it's that's been your long desire, this is your opportunity.
There you go.
But we will be back in another episode with, we're going to talk about Chris's experiences at the Lizzie Borden house, and we're going to go a little bit further into that investigation. So definitely check that out. Also, if you haven't already decided to join us over on Patreon as a Parajunkie, definitely consider doing that. We just did a exclusive episode where we were talking about Chris's experience in New England, and then all of a sudden the ghosts started really acting a fool. So we had our Ghost Tube app out, and they were very talkative. So definitely, if you would like to see that, join us over on Patreon. Also, make sure to follow us on TikTok at the Savannah Underground. But with that, my name is Madison Timmons.
And I'm Chris Susi.
I'm Dr. Doodoo.
There you go. And stay spooky, y'all.